Hello and welcome to the Two Ace Podcast, the podcast designed to help you manifest your Two Ace mindset. My name is Josh Brooks and my one focus is success through the art of discipline and flow. I hope you enjoy the episode. Now let's get right into it.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever time you're joining me today. I hope you're having a good one. And today I'm joined by Dagna, and we're going to be talking about engineering your mind and reprogramming the mind to achieve what you want to achieve in life. And hi, Dagna, how are you doing today?
Hi, Josh. I'm awesome. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, no worries. Would you like to just introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am an engineer who became a coach for engineers and ambitious professionals in tech. And recently, I have put all the knowledge that I've gained in my journey and career of engineering and coaching into a book that I hope that we dive into on today's episode. The book's called The Brain Refactor, available on Amazon, and I am ready for us to get started.
Cool. So let's talk about burnout first of all. Now, I saw on your profile you mentioned burning out, and I know in your book or one of your books that you've talked about that before. So how do you overcome burnout?
You know, burnout is kind of tricky because it's not like one day you wake up and all of a sudden you have burnout. It's kind of like this little drops that, keep coming, that are created like by bad habits, by the way of life, really. And if you're not being mindful about recharging yourself, about what it is that you value in your life, you're likely heading in that direction too. Burnout is very common, especially in tech. Especially, I'm saying especially in tech because that's my domain. That's where I am and work with people. And I can see it all over the place, really. And after COVID, it's even more prominent that people have been burned out. Part of it is the culture, the kind of mindset around, working. And especially where I live right now in the United States, it's pretty bad. There are other cultures. I'm from Poland. I'm an Eastern European, where it feels like people are more working to live versus here it feels like people are more living to work. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that kind of attitude really contributes to burning yourself out.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm sure as an author, you might have experienced burnout in yourself. Do you want to just dive into a bit of detail in how when you were actually writing your book, if you experienced that kind of thing?
Absolutely. I'd love that. So I would like to read a piece of the book, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course. Go ahead. Love it.
That talks about, what you might be feeling or experiencing if you're in the midst of burnout, because sometimes we're not even aware that it's happening to us, right? I was in a place like that in my career where I was experiencing burnout and I was clueless. I had no idea until someone pointed it out. Okay, so here are some things that you might be feeling or experiencing in the midst of burnout. Feeling totally drained. It's like running on empty, both physically and emotionally. The usual energy and enthusiasm for things have just disappeared. So maybe you're feeling completely ineffective and you don't seem to feel like you're making a difference and you're likely questioning the point of it all. Or you're easily annoyed. Little things get on your nerves more than they used to, which might put a strain on your relationships with others. Or you're cynical and you might find yourself becoming more negative about work, people, and life in general. Or maybe you want to isolate yourself and it's like a cloud of pessimism is following you everywhere you go. And you just want it to let it soak you while you binge whole seasons of TV series on your living room sofa, crunching on your favorite junk food. That was me. Perhaps maybe your performance falls off the cliff. Tasks that used to be a breeze now feel like climbing a mountain. Productivity takes a hit and motivation is hard to come by. Procrastination becomes a regular thing. And things that used to be fun or pleasurable or intellectually stimulating are no longer bringing you joy. It's like the color has faded and you just feel like you just don't care anymore. So that's how burnout might look like.
Yeah, so I've experienced burnout before, and it's something that you don't ever think is going to happen until it happens. You feel so motivated, you feel so driven, you feel all these things, and even if you don't feel driven or motivated, you're still doing it, and you're pushing through, and you're being disciplined, and you're getting all the work done, and then just suddenly, burnout. That's it. You're so tired all the time, and it's like literally just, you said it there, literally like, you've just gone from one extreme to the other. So how do you tell people to, rewire their mind and flip that switch in their brain to,
we have to first analyze and understand where it came from. So the way that I like to work with my coaching clients, and I like to say that I moved from programming computers as a software engineer to reprogramming human minds as a coach, because that's what I do with my clients. And the very first thing that we do is dive into that legacy code base that's sitting in your mind, right? Because we have to understand that you are working just like your code dictates you to work. So if you have burned yourself out, if that's a pattern for you, if you tend to do this, there's a reason, because everything you do just follows your internal code. And basically, to understand, you have to dive in. Or in programming language, you would say we have to dive in, we have to debug to understand what is really going on. What kind of lines of code are sitting there that are messing up your performance and leading to burnout? It could be beliefs about how hard you have to work. It could be beliefs about downtime being a waste of time. It could be beliefs about, being a perfectionist, or having what I call a hard work bias, where you tend to value what's difficult and what requires a lot of effort and dismiss the things that come to you naturally or easily. Or it could come from lack of boundaries, right? I mean, I myself have not learned about boundaries until I ended up in talk therapy to recover from burnout. So a lot of the time, we're just not aware how that legacy mental code is driving us, how it contributes to how we think, how we act, what is it that we do. But that code is what contributes to the outcomes that we see in our lives, including the burnout.
So how do you think this code got there in the first place? Because I think I could partially answer my own question there. So I've heard of something called the theta state, which is the first 7 years of our lives, and that's where like all the deep programming occurs, and like everything you learn and experience in the first 7 years of your life is sort of projected out throughout your entire existence in that life. So if you're like trying to break a habit that you've had since the first 7 years, you've got to literally, like you said, you've got to debug your own mind and figure it out.
Exactly. So like from neuroscience, what we know about brains is the numbers that I've heard were slightly different, but the most rapid growth and development of the human brain happens between years of 0 to 5, and then in adolescence. So when you're a teenager, right? These are the most rapid changes that your brain has to go through. And that kind of sets up your hardware and your software and how your brain operates. And you're absolutely right that a lot of the things that happen in your early childhood shape you and who you are. However, it's not all doom and gloom, right? If something happened that was maybe traumatic or difficult, like it doesn't set you up for failure for a lifetime, because you can literally rewire and reprogram anything that you would like to reprogram, any kind of belief or set of thought patterns. You can also improve your hardware by either different kind of lifestyle changes, or doing something that's called neurofeedback training, which is like a also called QEEG biofeedback training, and that literally helps your brain rewire itself and optimize itself. So these are the kind of how you said it. These are the situations in your life that really shape you. And again, from a programmer's perspective, from a software engineer perspective, a lot of the time when you join a new company, you join a company working on a product that someone else has built before you, right? And that's why it's called legacy code. And you dive into that code, you try to understand why the product works that way. When you're creating a new feature, trying to fix a bug that some users spotted, you jump into those lines and you try to understand, okay, how this piece of code got into that place. And by having that understanding, you can then reprogram it. And the same thing is true for your own mind, for your own brain. So you can analyze your beliefs, your thoughts, your actions, understand, okay, maybe I do this thing because the people who surrounded me when I was growing up modeled that kind of behavior for me. And it got embedded in my internal legacy mental code. But you can always reprogram that.
Yeah, definitely. You mentioned, is it QQEG? Is that an acronym?
Yes, it's for, let me look it up real quick because I don't want to like make it up and misremember. But QEEG stands for quantitative electroencephalography.
Whoa.
What that means is basically that you have this electrodes that are measuring your brainwave activity, the frequencies that your brain is working at. And so I've done such a training for myself. It's really good for depression, for ADHD, for sleep disorders, for anxiety. And honestly, I ended up doing my neurofeedback training because I kind of wanted to try out psychedelics. And the first thing that you do in biofeedback is you do a brain map, a brain scan. And that scan can tell you whether or not your brain is more likely or less likely to experience any side effects of psychedelics, negative side effects. I'm talking not coming back, having a psychotic outbreak, or other dangerous things that could happen if your brain is not in good space. So anyway, the biofeedback training, the QEEG biofeedback training, is based on measuring your brainwave activity and retraining your brain so that it becomes more optimal, so that the frequencies are kind of running together and operating smoothly. It basically is like a hardware tune-up for your brain. So imagine it's kind of like taking your car to a mechanic to maybe boost your engine. It's the same thing, except you're doing it with your brain.
All right, good. How does that like actually work though, like in physical reality? Like, because obviously there's a lot going on in our brain that we can't really comprehend, and giving it a jump start is one thing, but how do you actually do that?
Yes. So the way that the neurofeedback training or QEEG biofeedback training works is that you have to go into a clinic. At the clinic, an experienced clinician would put like a little hat on your head, and they would measure brainwave activity across different regions of your brain. The clinic that I went to, they measured, I believe it was 55 different areas of my brain. And they gave me a very detailed report saying, look, Dagna, 10 out of the 55 areas are not optimal. And that's probably why you're experiencing XYZ and so on, right? And I could relate to what they were telling me because there's an area in your brain that's responsible for overthinking. There's an area in your brain responsible for anxiety. There's an area in your brain responsible for your sleep. I mean, it's a little more complicated than that, but if you improve that particular area, then you can improve a lot of things that are related to what it is related to. And for me, there were 10 out of 55 areas that were either working too much or not enough. Also, in my brain scan, I learned that the front of my brain was working at 7 hertz, while the back of my brain was working at 13 hertz, which means it would sample 13 bits of information per second. And the back was like twice as fast as the front, meaning
Oh, wow.
the front was kind of lazy and the back was processing a lot of noise, a lot of unnecessary information. And I could tell that there was something going on there because I would feel at night really tired, kind of like brain dead. Like the only thing I could do was watch Netflix because my brain was too tired to focus on getting things done. And while going through my training, I did 2 different types of sessions, improving specifically the areas that were either underperforming or overperforming and being out of sync with the rest of my brain. And then I also did retraining, kind of like the front to the back. So I speeded up my front and slowed down my back so my brain could be more efficient in using the energy that I had throughout the day, because it's a limited amount of energy that you have every day, right? So I didn't want to waste it. I wanted to make sure that it's being used efficiently in a way that helps me live my life better. And I can tell you that it's very surreal whenever you go through a training like that, because like it's super easy from a perspective of client or patient. It's super easy because all you have to do after you've had your brain mapped is show up to your session and watch TV. And that's it. You watch TV and your brain improves itself. And here's how it works, Josh. You pick a movie and there's specialized software that, again, is measuring like a specific area in your brain that you're trying to improve. And as you're watching it, as you're watching a movie, the screen size would change, or it would change the brightness of the screen, or the volume that you're listening to would change, go down or up, depending on whether your brain was in the right frequency or not.
Oh, wow.
So by having that real-time feedback, you were able to essentially tell your brain, give it kind of like a penalty for being in the wrong frequency by lowering the audio or changing the visual. Or you could just leave everything smooth and just watching your movie, which is what the brain really wanted, because brains want to be efficient. They don't want to waste energy. So whenever you show your brain how to be more efficient, it will likely stay that way, because it's just biologically wired to be efficient and to not waste any resources given.
Yeah.
So again, from my perspective as a client, all I had to do was pay for my sessions, show up, watch a movie. And after 20 sessions, I could tell my brain has improved tremendously. I did 40 in order to kind of get ahead and finish the entire protocol that was recommended to me by my clinician. And then I ended up also taking my son, who at the time was 5 years old, who we thought had ADHD. And with his ADHD, I can tell you that he was kind of getting in trouble because of impulsivity, getting in trouble with other kids in preschool. And the moment we took him to his neurofeedback training, after just 20 sessions, we saw all the quote unquote problematic traits disappear.
Oh, really?
And then all the good traits like creativity, energy, and being sensitive, like they stayed. So he's still the same lovely boy that he was, but all those issues and problems that would cause the preschool teachers to call us and tell us, hey, I think it's time to get your son to a pediatrician because he's causing trouble in the classroom. And I'm like, he's 5 years old. I mean, what are you doing? Like, I'm not going to put him on a pill at 5 years old to destroy his liver, you know? So that worked tremendously for him, and it worked very good for myself as well. But again, it's really surreal to describe, because you live your entire life thinking that this is just how it is. This is how your brain works, and this is how your brain processes. Unless you go through this hardware update. And once you have gone through this hardware update, it feels like it's incredible that you had never known that your life could be so much better and easier and more efficient. And like, I sometimes don't know how to put it into words. This is how phenomenal that change has been.
Yeah, it sounds truly valuable. I'm gonna have to give it a go myself to really experience it. It sounds like you're trying to really like give it all the energy, but you can't quite get into words how much like benefit there actually is to it. I can kind of resonate with it, but I must have to try it myself to
phenomenal.
feel it.
And I highly recommend it if it's in your area, Josh. And I've tried to put it into words in my Substack article, so I'd be happy to send it over to you so you can kind of see even more in details, because I probably forgot about many of the things to mention here. So that might be a helpful resource.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that sounds something that I'm really interested in. I'd love to see what's going on in my brain and which frequencies are playing up and which are in tune and which are being lazy, which are being too active.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how, as someone that might not be able to directly access a tool like that, would you say that there's any other catalysts for improvement or catalysts to change the way your brain is thinking? Like, let's say someone in the audience is right now maybe listening to the podcast, and then after it, all they want to do is just go and sit and watch Netflix because their brain is just, like you said, that they might be feeling brain dead, or they might be feeling too exhausted to do work or to do whatever they need to do, but instead they're going to procrastinate or do something that maybe isn't in alignment with what they want to do. But yeah, so would you say there's any catalysts that they could immediately access, or cheaper,
I would
guess?
highly recommend starting with therapy and coaching. The way I see it is that therapy and like, if you were to again compare the human brain to, let's say, a phone, right?
Yeah.
How often do you do software updates, Josh?
Pretty regularly.
Right? And a lot of them are just automatic. They just get downloaded to your phone and just update your phone, right? So we don't really think about it. And then how often do you do a hardware update where you go and just trade your phone for a newer version?
Yeah, probably should do it more often, but every few years, I guess.
Right. And you could do the same for your brain, where the software updates that I'm referring to is working with a therapist or a coach, right? Because it's hard to change your software if you don't understand what's really going on in there and how that legacy looks like. So that is the very first step, optimizing the software. Therapy and coaching are phenomenal for that. They're a little bit different in how they work, because therapy, like if you were to reduce your mental health to a number from -5 to 5, therapy is kind of working on getting you from -5 to somewhere around 0, where 0 is like normal, quote unquote, or regular, or like not experiencing mental health issues, where coaching is more focused about getting you from that around 0 to your 5, to your peak performance, to the best of your life that you could possibly live. There's a little bit of overlap, but that focus is different, and depending on what it is that you're trying to look for. If you're trying to get out of slump, therapy is probably better. If you're trying to do that peak performance optimization, coaching is probably better. A lot of therapists are just not equipped for looking into the peak performance. They're like, okay, you're not depressed, you don't have anxiety, you don't have sleep issues. I guess there's not much that we could do here, And this is where the coaches are like, yes, let's go. Let's figure out how we can make it even better for you, right? That's the very first step. The second step is trying to figure out how you can improve the hardware, right, of your brain, which will probably be expensive if you go the neurofeedback or biofeedback training route, because it's not cheap, but it's so worth it. Because of its somewhat permanent improvement that it can make, right? Or you could also look into lifestyle improvements, right? Like, what do you feed your brain? Do you put a lot of negativity into it? Do you eat healthy diet? Because that has a lot of implications on how your brain works too, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I've noticed that in changing my diet over the past year or so, that my brain has felt so much more optimized. Literally, like just the simple like habit of just not eating junk food, that really like sticks in, and I've been fasting for longer in the morning, and I've been able to get into flow state so much more like efficiently and just do work, and then after I've done my hard deep work, I can then break my fast, and enjoy that, and eating whole foods, things like that. And
Absolutely.
you mentioned the neurofeedback, and it's quite expensive. Is there a ballpark figure that sort of out there?
It's not it really depends on where you are in the world and what's the nearest clinic next to you. So there's not a ballpark I could share. I've spent a few $1,000s for myself, and I would say that I would do it again and again and again in a heartbeat because of the improvements it's made, And when you think about investment like that, I always believe that I am my best investment, right?
Yes,
because
definitely.
I am in the center of everything that I do, and even more so, my brain is involved in everything that I do. And whether I do it consciously or unconsciously, completely on autopilot, my brain is what's behind my life, right? So, so basically, it's not the cheapest option, but again, I highly recommend it. And it also requires effort because you have to show up to your sessions. However, Josh, would you expect a permanent change after going 20 times to the gym?
No.
Right? Exactly. But here, your brain could experience a permanent positive change in just 20 sessions, 40 sessions, 60 sessions, depending on how many issues you might have, how many optimizations you might need in order to improve it.
Well, yeah, I mean, now I've had more than a second to think about that. Going to the gym 20 times, if you've been to the gym 20 times, arguably there could be a significant impact in your whole life there, because you've been 20 times, you've been around the people that go to the gym more regularly than you, so you've seen that, and you could perhaps see the inspiration, and you could perhaps see that behavior and the fact that you're indulging in that behavior as well. It could change your life significantly from that point, as in, like, you could either be like, okay, maybe the gym isn't for me, I'm going to go in this direction instead, or the gym or another type of exercise is for me, I'm going to start doing it and create a sustainable routine for me to then stick with. So,
yes, but what you're saying is that you're going to continue with the physical exercise and movement, so it's not really hard stop after 20, right?
Yeah, okay, yeah, exactly. So you mentioned when you first mentioned this neurofeedback training, you mentioned how your intention of doing it was to explore more of your brain, so you can be ready to explore like psychedelics, you said earlier.
Yes.
So would you like to just dive into a little bit more about that? It's fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. I love talking about it because it was an incredible experience, and I would say it was like the cherry on the top of all the self-improvement that I've done over the years, starting with therapy, coaching, followed by neurofeedback training. And then my experience was really incredible. And we can go into the details. But I believe the reason why it was a cherry on the top and why I did it once and I'll probably never ever have to do it again was because of all the prep work.
Yeah.
So I really want to highlight that first of all, psychedelics not for everyone, right? And it's not a magical pill that will solve all your problems. Because a lot of people, from what I've read and the documentaries that I've seen, have taken psychedelics, and even if they didn't had the negative effects, like a psychosis, like, or not coming fully back from the trip, they would describe their trip as essentially darkness, being nowhere, and kind of feeling like that's it, there's nothing else to see. And I've experienced that in my trip as well, However, the difference was the moment you can surrender and let go and really open yourself up to the experience without trying to control it, that's when incredible things can happen and incredible insights might come to you. In my case, I truly believe that that one weekend, it was 3 ceremonies, and I'll go into details in a second, was literally a lifetime of wisdom that got downloaded to my brain. And again, to use the phone metaphor, it's kind of like plugging yourself to a cloud and just doing a download. That's how it felt. I felt like I've learned what people see in their 90s at their deathbed. And I was able to access that kind of perspective of my life. And it changed so many things in such a beautiful and positive way. So the way that my experience looked like, it was a legal, safe space where there were probably like 40 or 50 of us psychonauts tripping. And we had about 15 volunteers taking care of us while we were doing that. Because you might want to drink water, go to the restroom, get a blanket, get another pillow. So all you had to do was just raise your hand and a volunteer will come to assist you. Or some people going through difficult experiences would just want someone for a moment there holding their hand, right? Because they were processing something difficult. So the volunteers were there, and there were also 2 medical on staff, a doctor and a nurse. And I'm pretty sure they had like 911 dialed on their phone, just ready to press the button in case something happened to call an ambulance. Safety is really key because until you do it, you don't really know how a psychedelic can affect your brain. And again, I highly recommend doing all your research if you're thinking about it. And one of the things that we kind of mentioned before the show, Josh, as we were talking about it, from all the research that I've done, I've learned that you should not really consider it before you're 30 years old. We talked a little bit about brain development, and the neuroscience tells us that brain pretty much matures like its main hardware until you're like 27 or 28 years old. And the last thing that matures from like a biological perspective is your ability to process emotions. And a lot of what comes up in psychedelics that can be extremely difficult is emotions. And a lot of people, you know, if you try to suppress them, if you cannot handle them, if you're not equipped, prepared to handle what's coming up, you will probably not experience the benefits of it, right? What attracted me to psychedelics was watching Netflix documentaries. One of them was called How to Change Your Mind. And the second one was Unwell, which had an episode on ayahuasca specifically. So that's what I did. I did ayahuasca, not magic mushrooms. And the way it kind of looked like is on Friday, I got to my retreat place center, checked in. We were fasting since noon. I think they served like a very light lunch, but then at 6 p.m. it was the very first ceremony. Then the second day, on Saturday, we had an optional morning ceremony that we could partake in or not. I decided to do it because, like, I was thinking, I'm already here, you know? I kind of want to be here. Let's just do it. After Saturday morning trip ceremony, you have lunch and a group circle where people share what they've experienced. It's kind of like a group therapy setting where everyone shares to make sense of what they have experienced. And then at night, at 6 p.m., there was another ceremony. And then on Sunday, there's another group coaching session where everybody kind of integrates their experience, what it meant for them, and how to really put the lessons they've learned into their life, depending on what it is that they came with. Because it's very important as you're preparing for a psychedelic trip not only to evaluate your mental health, your family health history. You could do the neurofeedback training map and see whether your brain is in a good state for a trip like that. And then you also have to have an intention.
Yeah.
That intention is really important, because as you're going into that experience, it's important to have a question, to have a reason, an answer that you're looking for. In my case, I learned in therapy that I needed to let go of the past and forgive people who thought did me wrong. And I knew it here, during therapy. Like I kind of theoretically knew that, but inside, I was still holding on to some grudges, and I was still like, sure, I forgive you, but like I kind of hate you a little bit still, So that was really my original intention. Go into that experience and integrate what I theoretically know into how I actually want to live, into what's in my heart. And I can tell you that I was successful in the very first trip, because I was able to kind of go back into the past and really forgive. Forgive my family members, forgive my ex-boyfriends, forgive my friends, forgive my past self who made mistakes. I even forgave history, and I forgave my country, and I forgave, some theoretical concepts that I didn't realize how much they had shaped me. But I had to let go of holding on to those concepts and those feelings of them causing some wrongs to me. And I knew that already from therapy, but it wasn't really integrated. And psychedelics allowed me to integrate that into my being, into living from that place. And it was kind of funny, Josh, because like I was thinking to myself, well, there's 3 trips and I already resolved all those issues that I had in the very first one. Like, what do I do next? So my theme, because it was 3 trips, 3 ceremonies, I was like, okay, I resolved my past. Let's focus on my present. And then in the third, I happened to focus on the future. That's not because I planned it, but it kind of came out that way, looking back. In the second one, I wanted to really focus on the present, on who am I in my current relationships with the people that are surrounding me every day. My husband, my kids, my family members, my friends, my clients, my coworkers. So when I really dialed down, I realized in my experience that I have so much love to give, and that I've been holding it all back because of my past baggage. And so part of the ayahuasca experience is that what you do that is called purging. Have you heard about that, Josh?
I've heard of it, but I'm not too clued up on it myself. If you'd like to just go into a bit more explanation about that.
So purging is essentially, it could be laughing, it could be crying, it could be throwing up, it could be pooping. So it could be, it's not because the ayahuasca vine is toxic to your body, it's just part of the therapeutical effect.
Yeah.
Based on what we currently know about the neuroscience of psychedelics. And in my case, in the very first trip, it was the laughing and crying. That was my purging. But in the second one, it was the throwing up, which was a little gross. But it felt like all this baggage that was preventing me from really loving people around me, like I just got rid of it. It just left my body. It truly felt like this negative energy, or however you want to call it. And I'm kind of rolling my eyes here because I'm a very analytical engineering mind. So all that, I feel like I left it there at the retreat center. And I felt coming out of that second experience full of love. And I just wanted to love people around me in this pure maternal kind of loving way, to hug them, embrace them, tell them, you're so beautiful, I love you, you're meant to do great things. And I could tell that not everybody had a kind of experience I had. I could tell a lot of people were going through pains from the past, maybe relieving their traumas. And I was here smiling, lovely. It was truly remarkable, but it was different from other psychonauts, because what I believe was all that prep work that I've done, that I told you about, Josh, right? And that brings us to the third experience, which I was like, okay, so I did process my past and really let go of that past. I processed the baggage that was currently holding me from being present and loving in the most important relationships in my life. What do I do next? Right? And so my last intention was, I asked, please show me my strength, my motivation, and my purpose. So those were the three things that I wanted to see and experience. And for me, I had received what you could call, I guess, affirmations, which was like repeated sentences over and over and over again. And my mind would I would keep telling myself those sentences, but it felt like they didn't come from me. Like I didn't come up with the answer, or like the answer was hidden somewhere deep inside, but on my conscious level, I wouldn't have access to it on a day-to-day. So the answers that I received was that my strength is in my breath, that I can breathe through anything. And that kind of makes sense, because if I can't breathe, then I'm dead, so it doesn't really matter, right? And then my motivation is that I get to do this. I get to be alive. And it's incredible that I get to do this. And again, I don't really know how to explain that piece, but looking at myself from just a few years back, being burned out, depressed, experiencing what's called complicated grief from moving abroad, from moving from Poland to the United States. It's like I became this completely different person and gained this completely different, fresh perspective on what it means to be alive. And it like motivated me. Like, wow, I get to do this. This is a gift, and I am alive. I get to be alive. Wow. And you listening are probably like, okay, Dagna, are you on something right now? Which I'm absolutely not. But that effect was just, it's like an aha moment. It's like a near-death experience that changes how you see life forever. You cannot unsee that, right?
Yeah.
And in terms of my life's purpose, I learned about myself that I help people see. I help them see what is. And that beautifully plays into what it is that I do in coaching. I just help people see what's not working for them and how they can improve their lives if they could only address those things, right? And it works. I've seen people have incredible results as we work together. So I know I've talked a lot. Josh, do you have any questions?
I have a lot of questions. Yeah, that was really encapsulating. I was really trying to be sort of empathize and be there and sort of imagine myself in your situation and in your shoes going through those experiences. And it must have been intense, to say the least. But like a relieving intensity. How far apart were the trips?
So the first one was Friday, 6 p.m. The second one was Saturday, I think 8 or 7 a.m. So like 12-hour apart.
Oh, really? Only 12 hours?
And then Saturday night was 6 p.m. again. So, like 12 hours.
I thought there'd be like a tolerance build up after the first one, and so then the second and then third would be weaker. Is that how it works?
What happens was, as you go into each ceremony, you get to choose how many little cups you drink.
Right.
So that way you can control how much or how little of the substance you consume. With the caveat, you don't really know how it's going to hit you the very first time, right? And yes, you're right, there's a buildup. So like the third ceremony is much more potent just because you've already consumed it twice in the past 24 hours, right?
Mm.
And mine, I should probably mention that too. Mine was really scary, the third one, because I died.
Oh, wow.
Not biologically, but I experienced what called ego death, which is that psychological sense of dying. And I am convinced that what I saw was essentially my last moments. And I experienced the fear of dying as you're dying. And that's probably why I'll never do psychedelics ever again, because it was the most terrifying fear you could imagine.
Wow. Yeah, that does. I mean, for starters, it does sound like it's really acted as a catalyst for your life and your brain, really sort of maybe not flipping on its head, but really accelerating you forwards into doing what you're doing today. Like you said, it's helping you and it's really fit into place with how you're doing in your career and how you're helping people, and that's really nice to hear. That it fascinates me so much. So why, or do you think rather that, because you mentioned about the neurofeedback, how let's say it was 7 and 13 hertz, right? Do you think that the reason why you're able to access more of your brain or almost think or act in a certain way while you're under the influence of psychedelics is because they change the frequency of your brain or maybe make it work more harmoniously?
Yes. So the way psychedelics work, and it's beautifully explained in that documentary I mentioned, How to Change Your Mind on Netflix. But it's also beautifully explained in this free YouTube video that talks about the heroic dose of psychedelics from Johns Hopkins University. And one of the doctors or professors who actually studies it, he kind of dives into the science of it. So I highly recommend for anyone listening to just look it up real quick. But basically what psychedelics do is they change how your brain operates temporarily, right? Or ideally temporarily. And they would quiet certain areas of your brain down while heightening the other ones that usually don't talk to each other. And that's why you can have this incredible aha moments. What attracted me to psychedelics was watching one of those documentaries and hearing how this professor doing brain scans on people actively consuming the psychedelics, he was measuring their brains, and the participants of his study would say, this felt like 10 years of therapy in one experience. And I was like, wow, when I went into therapy the first time, it helped me tremendously in a matter of just a few sessions, a few months, because I was able to change my perspective just talking to someone. And so I was like, sign me up. 10 years of therapy and I can experience the benefits in just a weekend. Because it has been a profound experience and beneficial one for me. I was like, I want to do this. I want to do this thing. I want to really know, how much more I can grow as a person just from having that insight. And if you think about it, Josh, it's kind of like you're the therapist and the client, and it's all happening in your brain. So there's nowhere to hide and there's no way for you to lie your way out of it or just like not mention certain difficult topics, because again, it's all happening in your brain.
Yeah, wow. It's food for thought, definitely for me, and I'm sure the audience will be sort of thinking a lot about that experience. I want to. I feel like the people that be listening to this, they're trying to go on their self-improvement journey. They might have experienced either psychedelics before, or they've come across it and been like, no, because I'm on this journey, and it's all about being disciplined, and I have to, I have to be completely, you have to not drink or not do drugs, and you have to be, really on it every single day. So, speaking on the behalf of the people that may be interested, but are sort of unsure, maybe confused, maybe they're overthinking it, they're thinking, wait, maybe I have to do this ayahuasca, maybe I have to do it now, maybe, maybe that's the thing that's going to change my life. So for those sort of people that are really almost too interested and they want to do it now, right? What would you say to them? Because I can imagine that some people watching this podcast might be in a period of depression right now, or in a period of anxiety right now. And I say a period because it is temporary. If you listen to this, it will come to an end, right? And what I'm trying to say is, if you're in a period of depression or anxiety, maybe doing psychedelics isn't the right thing to do right now. Maybe it is to do therapy and do research and stuff like that. But is there anything that you think those sort of people should know about sort of the way in which you've done it and the way in which your experience of the whole thing can be like manipulated, optimized to other people?
I think I know what you're asking, Josh.
Yeah, okay.
And I would say that you're spot on. If someone is in deep depression, anxiety, and they are below 30 years old, I would not recommend doing psychedelics. It can bring more harm than good. And in fact, in my group circles, when we were doing the integration sessions, there were people who said that they've tried the psychedelic many times and it doesn't seem that it has helped. Because the one thing that we have to get clear here, Josh, what psychedelic will probably give you is the insight. You're going to learn something incredible, but then you go back into your life. And if you're not really able to put that insight into work, to integrate it in how you live your life, that trip was a waste. That you could have an incredible insight talking to a therapist, talking to a coach. So if you really want to do psychedelics, go for it. I would totally schedule it for your 30th birthday and plan to essentially educate yourself as you are planning on doing this amazing and incredible thing that could be incredibly insightful and very beneficial to your life. I'm not saying that because it's been for me, but again, it's been a cherry on the top for me because of all the prep work I've done over the years before I've done the psychedelics. The first thing, talk therapy. The second thing, coaching. Then optimizing the hardware. If you have access, highly recommend the neurofeedback training. If you don't, you could do it with your diet. You could do it by understanding what is it that you put into brain. Is it like the negative information or the positive information? Therapy and coaching can help you with optimizing your hardware as well. So educate yourself. Know what it is that you're going into. Don't rush it. Don't rush the process. And it's super important because turns out that most of bipolar disorders, schizophrenia, and any psychotic outbreaks that you might have because of a family history, a genetics history, will likely come out in your 20s. So you might not know that that could be a factor for your particular brain. And by waiting, just by waiting, you give your brain a chance to mature to the point where you can actually benefit from experience. If you do it in your 20s, and we're talking about the heroic dose here, make sure that you're in a safe and legal space. If something happens, that someone can call an ambulance for you. Ideally, there's a medic on the premises. And I wouldn't really do it in your 20s because of the risk factors associated with doing psychedelics, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I get you. I totally understand that. I feel like it's an opportunity for growth, but it's also an opportunity for disaster if something does go wrong, and the risk is kind of there, right?
Very well put. Yes.
Yeah. With that in mind, how do you, outside of work, outside of your career, how do you integrate this kind of knowledge into your day-to-day life?
So for me, being an ambitious professional who wanted a big family, I was stressing out a lot as a woman, being pregnant, feeling that it affected my promotions and how I would climb career ladder, my ability to make money. It was this kind of, I felt this stress from, on one hand, wanting to pursue a career, make money, and the other hand, having children and having a family, and then spending time with them while they're young, you know? And it really stressed me out. So one of the things I realized is that it looks like, based on my dying experience from the psychedelics, which I'm going to have my faith in, I'm going to die really old. So I have plenty of time to raise my kids and have an incredible career, and I don't really have to rush it. So that's like one of the really big benefits of all these experiences. The second one is I interact with people completely differently right now. I have much more love and patience to them. But I also have healthy boundaries in place. So I don't allow people to step over me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I got you. So it's really, I've heard the word neuroplasticity before, and I feel like psychedelics really help with neuroplasticity and really opening those brain connections and allowing for new information to flow in and new channels to develop in your brain. Is that right?
So neuroplasticity is happening in your brain as you pick up new habits, as you change your routines. So you don't really have to consume anything per se in order to experience that. And there is a phenomenal book that I would like to remember now that talks about how your brain changes itself. So give me just a second to Google it, because I remember the author. And it's a phenomenal book that talks about neuroplasticity, The Brain That Changes Itself, by Norman Deutsch. And he is a medical professional from what I remember. And it's a phenomenal book that talks about the capacity of the brain to change in various settings, again, without consuming anything, but more as a result of a lifestyle changes or doing certain exercises, physical activities that would stimulate parts of the brain to grow, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I got you. And at the end of the day, it's all about growth, right? We're growing each and every day. And I feel really benefited just from hearing your experience. I feel like I've almost been on a psychedelic journey myself just from listening to you go through yours. It's been really insightful. Thank you for that.
Yes,
just
absolutely.
Just to wrap it up, what is your definition of success? And how do you think this links to your purpose?
I love that you asked that question, because success is so personal to every individual. And, you know, when I talk about my definition of success, it's going to completely look differently from yours. So while I imagine the idea here is to inspire, please keep in mind to take a moment and think about, what does that mean for you listening? What is your definition of success? For me, it's trying to see how much better my life can get and live the adventure.
Yeah, I love that. You're truly embracing the journey there.
Yes. Because I get
beautiful.
to do this.
Yeah, see, everything you're doing is a link into the story. It's
That's
great.
right.
You think it's like, do you think that weekend of experience is really something that's, well, acts as a catalyst, I guess you could say, for your life?
Well, part of it too is that I was writing my book, Brain Refactor, and I was struggling through my very first draft, and then I did the psychedelic experience, and understanding that I help people see is my life's purpose and journey gave me such a boost of motivation to actually finish it. And so it's launching 2024. I know that this episode is supposed to come out early 2025, so the book is already out there and available on Amazon. And it's been such an incredible motivation to really finish it, because even if I don't get to coach, people one-on-one, but my book reaches them, then I could have such a positive impact on their lives. And I'm honored that I was able to go through that experience, to get that insight and just continue on my journey, which hasn't been easy, but I'm glad I got to do this.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a beautiful note to end on. Thank you for joining me today, Dagna. It's been great.
Thanks for having me, Josh. It was a blast sharing my journey.